Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here and daring the storm. And thank you to Ed Greenspan for a very, very generous and gracious introduction. My friendship with Ed goes back a long, long time, and my admiration goes back a long time. And I can tell you categorically that the Public Policy Forum is very, very lucky to have him as its leader. Merci, Ed Greenspan, pour cet accueil chaleureux. I feel a little like the elderly Southern lady who had listened to the preacher extolling the virtues of her dearly departed husband for over half an hour. She finally reached over and whispered to her son, "Quick, run up and see if that's your daddy in the box." I'm also deeply mindful of the fact that I'm the only thing between you and supper. So I'm going to be like Zsa Zsa Gabor on the occasion of each of her weddings. I'll try not to keep you too long. Now, it gets worse. Hard to believe, eh, Scott? It get worse? Yeah. Thank you. No, it's enormously humbling to have a prestigious award such as this named after you. Usually, you have to wait until you're dead. But the Public Policy Forum got tired of waiting. Now, if it's true that you're known by the company that you keep, I feel very privileged indeed to be associated. I hope you don't mind me saying Chief Terrence Paul, because that's how I always know him. Chief Terrence Paul, Adrian O'Prey, Doug House, and George Cooper as inaugural winners of the Frank McKenna Award for Leadership in Public Policy. These inspiring leaders and their significant contributions to public policy in our region are well known to me and to many in this room. So Ed, you're truly off to a very, very good start. Now, it's particularly gratifying to be honored by the Public Policy Forum for me. Shelley Aaronworth, founder, was a good friend of mine, and I've been involved in the forum since it started back in 1987. Public Policy Forum stimulates debate on the important issues of the day, and there can be no issue more important today in Atlantic Canada than immigration or population in general. If demography is destiny, we're facing an extinction event if we can't get our population decline reversed. I salute the Atlantic premiers and the Government of Canada for their launch of the Atlantic Immigration Pilot, which is a huge step in the right direction. Today, we had wonderful sessions all day long on how to keep immigrants here after we attract them. Our current rate of retention, of course, is the lowest in Canada. And we just know as a fact now, a graphic fact, that we need to increase our population. And we had wonderful ideas today about how to do exactly that. Now, I also learned today there are other ways by which we can increase our population. Danny Graham advised me that he's going to have a new baby at the age of 56. So I say to all of you, do your duty, go forth and multiply. Do your best to help Danny in dealing with this population crisis. Now, today there are a lot of critics of immigration and, for that matter, globalization. Some very loud critics of globalization and immigration. And no, I'm not going to be talking tonight about Donald Trump. That would be like watching endless reruns of the Kardashians. I'm actually going to give you a much more optimistic and joyful take on the world in which we live. We've talked all day, we worked all day, so I want to express myself tonight in a more optimistic way about the world that we live in. En fait, je veux vous présenter une perspective beaucoup plus optimiste et réjouissante sur le monde dans lequel nous vivons. Now, I acknowledge that the world is full of highly inflamed anti-immigration, anti-trade rhetoric. But the real enemy that we face, if it could be called an enemy, is odorless and tasteless and faceless and invisible. It's called change. The blinding speed of change and innovation, which is now moving at warp speed, has brought anxiety levels to a boiling point. People have become anxious and disoriented. They're sick and tired of being sick and tired. Unfortunately for politicians, we can't really blame change for all of our problems. because we actually like what change brings us. We like our smartphones. We like our iPads. We like Uber. We like file sharing. We like the convenience of ATMs. It's so much easier to pick on immigration and globalization, and they've become the scapegoats for all of our ills. I repeat, these are not our enemies. British, US, and Canadian workers are not losing jobs to immigration or global competitors. They're losing jobs to technology. The United States lost 5 million factory jobs since the year 2000. 5 million. 88% were taken over by robotics and innovation. It's popular to blame illegal immigration, particularly Mexicans. I repeat, it was not Mexicans who took American jobs, robots took American jobs. In fact, between 2009 and 2014, the number of Mexicans leaving the United States outnumbered new arrivals by 140,000. As the economy of Mexico improved, people from Mexico went back home to work. I repeat for emphasis, in spite of all of the hysteria, there are actually more Mexicans returning to Mexico than coming from Mexico to the United States. So, why the hell would we build a wall to keep Mexicans from returning back to Mexico? And if you send them back to Mexico, who's going to build a wall? So in spite of all of these job losses, U.S. factory production doubled during the same period of time, but with 1/3 the workforce. This is the world that we live in. And the innovation keeps pouring in whether we like it or not. As Henry Ford once said, if you ask people what they want, they would have said faster buggies. The speed of change can be terrifying. In 1998, Kodak had 170,000 employees. Now they have none. And what about Blockbuster and Napster, and the list goes on, all obsolete. The Stone Age didn't end for lack of stones. Something better came along, and something better will always be coming along. The only difference now, it's coming at breakneck speed. 5 years ago, we'd never heard of Uber. It's now the biggest taxi company in the world. Airbnb is the biggest hotel company in the world, but it doesn't have a single hotel room. It's hard to believe it was only 9 years ago that iPhones were invented. Less than 10 for Twitter, and Facebook, and Instagram, and WhatsApp, and Snapchat, and Kindle, and Dropbox, and Android, and Tinder. You're not supposed to know what Tinder is. That was just a test question to see if anybody knew what Tinder was. We've digitalized, however, everything from shopping to banking to relationships. Within 10 years, sooner, I would say, driverless vehicles will be commonplace. Over 700,000 truck and transit jobs will be lost in the UK, and over 4 million in the United States. On the plus side, in the US alone, 40,000 lives a year will be saved as a result of this change. And it's a change that's inevitable, because change is always inevitable. And there's more. Last year, more solar power was installed than fossil fuels. Doesn't stop there. New shoes are being printed now on 3D. And we sure see it in spades in the banking industry. Digitization and fintech are going with absolutely startling speed through the banking sector. Some countries, half the branches have been closed. We now have ATM machines. We now have digitalization. It's often said, without much humor, that each ATM machine carries the soul of 3 bank tellers. Overall, 70 to 80% of the jobs we know today will disappear over the next 20 years. That's the world that we live in. So Francis talked about that today. We're going to be living in a world of digitization. We're going to be living in a world of technology at the same time as we're going to have a world of reducing workers, and we're going to have to repopulate at the same time that we're going to be investing in productivity. So is it any wonder, with all of this dislocation, that people are desperately looking for some miraculous medicine that will ease their pain and anxiety? And populists are playing to that desperation. I repeat again, immigration, the global economy, might be the target, but it's not the source of the problem. Je répète que l'immigration et l'économie mondiale sont peut-être les cibles, mais elles ne sont pas la source du problème. In fact, it's part of the solution. Au contraire, elles font partie de la solution. The open global economy has helped lift over 1 billion people out of extreme poverty. 1 billion people out of extreme poverty. Let's consider the alternative. Recall back in 1930, Congress passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, starting a global war. Trade in the world had peaked at 30% of the world economy back in 1914. It fell to 10% in 1933 after Smoot-Hawley was passed. 1914 was called the Gilded Age of America. 1933 was called the Great Depression. And you know the rallying cry at that time? America first. We have to be very, very careful about the world ending up starting a trade war that could result in all of us in decline economically. And we shouldn't forget the role that immigrants have had in bringing growth and prosperity to developed countries around the world. In the United States alone, immigrants are responsible for 25% of all of the technology startups. Over half of the citizens in Toronto weren't even born in Canada. They were born outside Canada, and that city is on fire. Atlantic Canada is short 25,000 people for jobs that are available right now at the present time. If we could fill and retain those employees, we'd be on fire as well. And this is where I want to digress. Because if you just followed the daily news and all the carping and criticism and polarization, it would be enough to make you retreat to a cabin in the woods, stock it with canned goods, and wait out the apocalypse. We're saturated with stories of war and heinous crimes, terrible atrocities, scandals and deficits, melting ice caps and droughts, and so on and so on. But I stand before you today, and this is the real message of what I want to bring to you today. I stand before you today to deliver a message to you about a world of joy, of hope, of progress, and of opportunity for you and the world we live in. Mais je suis devant vous aujourd'hui pour vous livrer un message de bonheur, d'espoir et de possibilité pour vous et pour le monde dans lequel nous vivons. Because the world is actually a much better place than the headlines would indicate. Indeed, a far better place. It's a better place than it was a week ago, far better place than it was a year ago, and a far, far better place than it was just 10 years ago. Because all of the change that's so overwhelming and has created such anxiety amongst us has dramatically improved our quality of life. I'll give you a few examples. Our work efficiency has improved dramatically with smartphones and tablets. Our social relationships are deeply enriched with Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat and WhatsApp and Instagram. Our medical breakthroughs are stunning. Cancer survival rates alone have improved by as much as 50% in many cases. And it's hard to believe if you watch the evening news, but the world is more peaceful. We actually have fewer wars than ever before. We have fewer people killed in wars than ever before. We have fewer nuclear weapons than ever before. Our crime rate is plummeting, the lowest it's been in 50 years. Child mortality has fallen by half in just 25 years. Let me be more specific. Since 2000, more than 50 million of the world's children have made it to school instead of to a grave. Extreme poverty has been cut in half in 25 years. Our life expectancy is extending dramatically. Global life expectancy has increased by about 6 years in the last 2 decades alone. A child born this generation, in all probability, will live to be over 100 years. Canadians have added 25 years to their lifespan in the last century alone, and we're more prosperous and we're more educated. We have access to more knowledge. More than 3,000 new books are published every day. The amount of technical information in the world doubles every 2 years, and we're more connected. The number of text messages sent and received every day exceeds the population of the planet. YouTube serves up 2 billion videos every day. Internet is growing by 40% a year. People post 2.5 billion photos on Facebook every month. Twitter's tweets 750 times a second, even more when Trump goes to the bathroom. And this steady drumbeat of progress will not diminish. I repeat again, the Stone Age did not end because we ran out of stones. It ended because something better came along, and something better is always coming along. And in a planet filled with promise and opportunity, there's no better place to be than where we're sitting right now in this great country of Canada. And that's why I would exhort you, all of those of you who are recruiting people to our country, that you should hold your head high because you're selling the best product on the planet. When I was in Washington, other ambassadors would come up to me and tell me I was the luckiest person in the city. And I'd say, why? And they'd say, because you represent Canada. Every country in the world is envious of Canada. I did an event with the CEO of UPS earlier this week. He's from Germany. His wife is from Spain. The daughter has lived in half a dozen countries all over the world. And of his own free will, he just said to me, Frank, he said, this is a secret. I said, what's the secret? Canada. He said, my wife and I have been here 2 years. We've now decided we're going to live here the rest of our life. Our daughter's told us she refuses to leave this great country that you have. Do Canadians know what a magnificent country we live in? We live in a country of magnificent achievement and staggering potential. We live in a country that has never known war in its soil, the scourge of famine, the terrible pain of earthquakes and tsunamis and other natural disasters. We live in a country replete with arable land. We live in a country that contains 20% of the world's fresh water. We live in a country that's been able to balance a market economy, fiscal discipline, with progressive social programs. We live in a country where we truly believe that we're our brother's keeper. We live in a country that believes that government is not inherently evil and that it can affect improvement in our lives. We live in a country prepared to balance collective rights with individual rights. We live in a country where reasonable control of firearms is supported, where incarceration balances punishment with rehabilitation, and where climate change is not denied. We live in a country where we've been able to achieve a degree of accommodation, not always perfect, but always attempted between our two founding linguistic communities and our First Nations. We live in a country of immigrants, a country that welcomes people from all over the world to our bosom with welcoming arms. We live in a country that accommodates individual cultures and languages and customs and creeds. Like other Canadians, I was transfixed several years ago with the drama that unfolded on Parliament Hill that resulted in the death of a Canadian soldier. Emotions were at a fever pitch, and it was not surprising that strong feelings were being expressed. However, in my Canada, our innate sense of decency prevailed. When a mosque in Cold Lake, Alberta was defaced with the words, "Go home," it was quickly covered over with a new marking which read, "You are home." So, I say to you as I close tonight, let's honor the country in which we live, and let's enrich this country further by bringing to our country the richness of the tapestry of people from all over the planet. I would implore you that you live your life with charity and compassion and joy and hope and optimism and gratitude. We've been granted a very precious gift, a good life in a great country in a world that's rapidly improving for the lot of humanity. Do not be like those feckless souls who take from their parents and rob from their grandchildren. Live your life unselfishly. Live your life with purpose. Live your life with joy. Thank you.